Blake Montgomery had it all: wealth, power, and the perfect fiancé. But when his beloved dog goes missing in a storm, fate leads him to Jenna Miller, a struggling farm owner who challenges everything he thought he wanted. As sparks fly and secrets unravel, Blake must choose between obligation and true love. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Blake Montgomery parked his shiny black truck in front of the Sterling Country Club and adjusted his designer watch. Another Friday night dinner with the same people, talking about the same things: cattle prices, land acquisitions, and whose political connections were stronger. At 35, he owned Montgomery Ranch, the largest cattle operation in 3 counties, but these nights felt more like business meetings than social events. "There he is," called Gerald Sterling, raising a glass of bourbon. "The man who's about to become my son-in-law." Blake forced a smile. His engagement to Victoria Sterling had been announced just last month, a perfect match according to everyone in their social circle. Victoria's family owned the bank that financed half the businesses in town, and a merger of the Montgomery and Sterling families made perfect financial sense. "Sorry I'm late," Blake said, taking his seat next to Victoria, who looked immaculate, in a cream-colored dress, not a blonde hair out of place. "Darling, you know Daddy hates when people are late," Victoria said, her smile tight as she kissed his cheek. "Had to make sure Duke was settled. Storm's coming in tonight." At the mention of his 8-year-old retriever, Victoria's smile faltered. "That dog again. Really, Blake, you treat that animal better than most people." "Duke's family," Blake replied, simply accepting a drink from the waiter. Victoria rolled her eyes. "You'll need to get over that once we're married. I'm not having that shedding beast in our home." Blake said nothing, but a knot formed in his stomach. Their home would be the Montgomery mansion where he'd grown up, where Duke had spent his entire life. But that was an argument for another day. Dinner passed with talk of the upcoming charity auction. Victoria dominated the conversation, discussing the guest list while Blake's mind wandered to the dark clouds he'd seen gathering on the horizon. Duke hated thunderstorms. "Blake," Victoria snapped her fingers. "Are you listening? The Harrington wedding is tomorrow, and you promised to get your tuxedo altered." "Right," Blake nodded. "First thing tomorrow." "Unless you're busy with ranch business again," Victoria said, her tone making it clear what she thought of his hands-on approach to managing Montgomery Ranch. His father had run the operation from an office in town, but Blake preferred being on the land, working alongside his men. As if on cue, his phone buzzed. It was Frank, his ranch foreman. "Excuse me," Blake said, stepping away from the table. "Frank, what's up?" "Storm's rolling in faster than they predicted, boss. Might want to head back soon if you're worried about the east pasture fence. And didn't you say Duke's been acting jumpy?" "I'll be there in 20, Blake said, returning to the table. "Sorry everyone, I need to get back to the ranch. Storm's coming in early." Victoria's eyes flashed with irritation. "Blake, we're not finished with dinner. My parents' anniversary celebration is next weekend, and we need to discuss the details." "We can talk tomorrow," Blake said, already standing. "Frank says the storm's moving fast." Gerald Sterling laughed. "A rancher's work is never done, right?" "Blake, Victoria, you'd better get used to it." Victoria didn't look amused, but Blake was already heading for the door. The first drops of rain hit his windshield as he pulled out of the parking lot, and by the time he reached the ranch gates, it was pouring. Lightning flashed across the sky, followed by a massive boom of thunder that shook his truck. The ranch hands were securing equipment as Blake parked and jogged to the main house, getting soaked in the process. "Duke," he called, pushing through the front door. Usually the dog would come running, but the house remained silent. "Duke?" Blake checked Duke's favorite spots: the kitchen, the study, his bedroom, growing more concerned with each empty room. Frank appeared at the back door, rain dripping from his hat. "Something wrong, boss?" "Can't find Duke. He usually hides in my closet during storms." They searched the entire house twice, then the barns and outbuildings. No Duke. "When did you last see him?" Frank asked, shouting over the howling wind. "This morning. He was in the yard when I left." Blake's chest tightened with worry. "He must have gotten spooked by the thunder and run off." "We'll find him," Frank assured him, but the worsening storm made searching impossible. "First light tomorrow, we'll get everyone out looking." Blake barely slept that night, listening to the storm rage outside his window. Duke was out there, somewhere, terrified and alone. 10 miles away, Jenna Miller huddled under a leaking section of roof in her old farmhouse. At 28, she was fighting a losing battle to keep her family's small farm going after her father's death last year. The mortgage payments were 3 months behind, and the bank, Sterling Bank, had sent another threatening letter just yesterday. "Just get through tonight," she whispered to herself, placing another pot under a new leak. The farmhouse had been in her family for generations, but she couldn't afford to fix the roof. Every spare penny went to keeping her modest vegetable crops alive and caring for the few animals she had left: 3 cows, some chickens, and her horse, Penny. A particularly loud crack of thunder made her jump, and Jenna worried about the animals. In the barn, grabbing her raincoat, she dashed across the muddy yard, pushed open the heavy barn door and checked on each animal. "Everyone okay in here?" she asked, patting her favorite cow's nose. The animals seemed calm enough, considering the noise outside. As she turned to leave, a faint whimpering sound caught her attention. Jenna frowned, following the noise to a pile of hay in the corner. There, shivering and soaked, was a large golden retriever. "Hey there," she said softly, approaching the dog slowly. "Where did you come from, buddy?" The dog looked up with pain-filled eyes but didn't move. As Jenna came closer, she saw why. One of his front legs was badly injured, with a deep gash running along it. "Oh, you poor thing." Jenna knelt beside him, removing her raincoat to wrap around the shivering animal. "Let's get you inside where it's warm." The dog was heavy, but Jenna managed to half-carry, half-guide him to the house. Once inside, she gently dried him with towels, noting the expensive collar with a tag that read, "Duke." "Duke, huh? Well, you're a long way from home." The tag had a phone number, but when Jenna tried calling, the storm had knocked out the cell service. "Looks like you're staying with me tonight, Your Highness." She cleaned the wound as best she could, wincing at how deep it was. The dog would need a vet, but that would have to wait until morning. Jenna made a makeshift bed next to the fireplace and sat with Duke until he finally dozed off, one hand gently stroking his damp fur. "Someone's missing you tonight," she whispered. "Don't worry. We'll find your family tomorrow." By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind a mess of downed trees and flooded fields. Blake was already organizing search parties when Frank arrived at the main house. "I've called every vet within 50 miles, Blake said, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "Nothing yet. I've got 10 men ready to start searching, and I've printed these." He held up a stack of flyers with Duke's photo and the words, "Missing dog, 10,000 reward." Frank whistled at the amount. "Boss, that's an awful lot of money." "I don't care what it costs," Blake said firmly. "Duke's been with me through everything. My father's death, taking over the ranch, everything. He's not just a dog." The search continued all day. Blake drove every back road in the county, stopping at farms and houses, showing Duke's picture to everyone he met. By evening, he was hoarse from calling Duke's name and sick with worry. His phone rang as he was checking a wooded area near the county line. It was Victoria. "Blake, where are you? We have dinner with the wedding planner in an hour." Blake wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "I can't make it. Duke's missing." A pause. "You're cancelling our dinner because of your dog." "He's been gone since last night, Victoria. He's injured somewhere or worse." "It's just a dog, Blake. You can get another one." Blake's grip tightened on the phone. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said, hanging up before she could respond. As darkness fell, Blake reluctantly returned to the ranch, where Frank was coordinating the search efforts. "Nothing yet, boss," Frank reported. "But we've got the word out everywhere. Someone will spot him." Blake nodded, his throat tight. "Keep the reward amount quiet for now. I don't want people looking just for the money." "Too late for that, I'm afraid," Frank said, showing Blake his phone where social media posts were already circulating about the wealthy rancher offering a small fortune for his missing dog. Blake sighed. "I don't care why they look as long as they find him." Frank and Jenna woke early the next morning and checked on Duke. The dog seemed a little better, but still couldn't put weight on his injured leg. "Come on, boy, let's get you to the vet." With considerable effort, she helped Duke into her ancient pickup truck and drove to the only veterinarian she could afford, Dr. Wilson, an older man who often let her pay in installments. "This isn't your dog," Dr. Wilson observed as he examined Duke. "Found him during the storm. He was hurt and scared." The vet nodded, cleaning the wound carefully. "Deep laceration. Probably got caught on a fence or something sharp while running." "He's lucky you found him. This could have gotten infected quickly." While the vet worked, Jenna tried calling the number on Duke's collar again, but it went straight to voicemail. She left a message with her name and number. "He'll need antibiotics and rest," Dr. Wilson said, bandaging the leg. "And these aren't cheap, Jenna." Jenna bit her lip, thinking of her nearly empty bank account. "Put it on my tab? I'll have money after the farmer's market this weekend." Dr. Wilson studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Just this once, but you need to find this dog's owner. He's well bred and well cared for. Someone's looking for him." On the drive home, Jenna stopped at the general store for a few groceries and overheard people talking about a missing dog. "They say that Montgomery fella is offering $10,000 to whoever finds his retriever," an older woman was saying. "Can you imagine? $10,000 for a dog." Jenna froze. "Montgomery? As in Blake Montgomery, the cattle baron whose face was plastered on billboards around the county? That couldn't be a coincidence." "Excuse me," she interrupted. "This missing dog, do you know the owner's name or number?" The woman turned. "It's all over Facebook, dear. Blake Montgomery's dog went missing in the storm, golden retriever named Duke. There are posters up all over town." Jenna's heart raced. $10,000 would solve all her immediate problems, pay off her back mortgage, fix the roof, buy seed for next season. All she had to do was call the number and collect the reward, but something stopped her. The desperate message she'd left earlier hadn't mentioned finding Duke, just that she'd found a golden retriever. If Montgomery was as wealthy as everyone said, offering such a large reward, wouldn't he have checked his messages by now? Still pondering this, Jenna drove home. Duke greeted her at the door, moving better already thanks to the medication. "So you belong to Blake Montgomery," she told, the dog scratching behind his ears. "One of the richest men in the county. No wonder you have such a fancy collar." She should call again, leave another message with more details. The reward money flashed in her mind. Her mortgage paid, a new roof, maybe even repairs for her truck. But as Duke leaned against her leg, looking up with trusting eyes, Jenna felt uncomfortable. This wasn't about money. This was about reuniting a lost dog with someone who clearly loved him very much. "Let's get you home, Duke," she said, reaching for her phone. 3 days after Duke disappeared, Blake was losing hope. The reward had brought out dozens of false leads. People claiming to have seen a dog matching Duke's description, only to disappear when Blake asked for proof or offered to meet them. He was checking his voicemails for the 20th time that day when he noticed one from an unfamiliar number that he'd somehow missed. A woman's voice saying she'd found a golden retriever during the storm. Blake's hands shook as he called the number back. It rang several times before someone answered. "Hello? This is Blake Montgomery. You left a message about finding a dog?" "Yes." The woman sounded relieved. "Is your dog's name Duke?" "Golden retriever with a blue collar." Blake's heart jumped. "Yes, where are you? Is he okay?" "He's fine," she assured him. "He hurt his leg, but the vet fixed him up. I've been trying to reach you for days." Blake nearly collapsed with relief. "I can be there in... Where are you exactly?" The woman gave him directions to a small farm on the outskirts of the county. Blake scribbled them down, thanked her profusely, and was in his truck within minutes. The drive seemed to take forever. Blake rehearsed what he'd say, how he'd express his gratitude. The reward, of course. This woman had saved Duke, and Blake would make sure she was well compensated for her kindness. When he finally turned down the long driveway to the Miller farm, Blake was surprised at the modest homestead. A small, weathered farmhouse sat surrounded by a few acres of cultivated land. The roof was visibly damaged in several places, and the barn looked like it needed serious repairs. Before Blake could even park, the front door opened, and a golden blur came rushing out, barking happily. "Duke!" Blake was out of the truck in an instant, kneeling as his dog bounded into his arms, nearly knocking him over. "I thought I'd lost you, buddy." Duke licked his face excitedly, his tail wagging so hard his whole body shook. Blake noticed the bandage on his front leg, but was too overcome with emotion to care about anything except having his best friend back. He's been watching the driveway since I called you. Blake looked up to see a young woman standing on the porch. She wore faded jeans and a simple blue shirt, her brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Despite her plain appearance, there was something striking about her, a quiet dignity in the way she carried herself. "You must be Jenna," Blake said, standing up with Duke pressed against his leg. "I can't thank you enough for taking care of..." "Him?" She smiled, and Blake noticed how it transformed her face. "He's a wonderful dog. Found him hiding in my barn during the storm, hurt and scared." Blake approached the porch, reaching for his wallet. "The reward? I'm offering $10,000 for Duke's safe return." To his surprise, Jenna shook her head. "I didn't do it for money." Blake stared at her, confused. "But the posters, the social media posts, everyone knows about the reward." "I only heard about that after I'd already found him and taken him to the vet," she explained. "And anyway, I didn't save him for a reward. I did it because he needed help." Blake was stunned. In his world, everything had a price. Everyone wanted something from him. His money, his influence, his family name. But this woman, living on what was clearly a struggling farm, was refusing a small fortune out of principle. "At least let me cover the vet bills," he insisted. Jenna hesitated, then nodded. "That would be helpful." Dr. Wilson was kind enough to treat Duke on credit. As Blake wrote a check, he took in more details of the farm. Despite its rundown appearance, the place was tidy and well organized. A small vegetable garden grew near the house, and he could see a few cows grazing in a back pasture. "You run this place alone?" he asked, handing her the check. "Since my father passed last year," Jenna replied, tucking the check into her pocket without looking at the amount. "It's not much, but it's home." Blake was about to respond when his phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. "Excuse me," he said, stepping away to answer. "Blake, where are you now? Mother's been trying to reach you about the seating arrangements." "I found Duke," Blake said. "Or rather, someone found him and took care of him." "Oh, good," Victoria said dismissively. "So you'll be at the club for dinner tonight? The Harringtons are expecting us." Blake looked back at Jenna, who was kneeling beside Duke, gently checking his bandaged leg. "I'll have to let you know. I need to take care of Duke first." Victoria's sigh was audible. "This is exactly what I'm talking about, Blake. You can't keep canceling plans because of that dog." "I'll call you later," Blake said firmly, ending the call. He rejoined Jenna and Duke on the porch. "Your fiancé?" Jenna asked, nodding toward the phone. Blake raised an eyebrow. "How did you know?" Jenna smiled. "Everyone knows Blake Montgomery is engaged to Victoria Sterling. It was in all the papers." "Right," Blake said, suddenly uncomfortable with how his private life was public knowledge. "Listen, I really am grateful for what you did for Duke. If there's anything else I can do to thank you..." "Just take good care of him," Jenna said, giving Duke a final pat. "He's special." As Blake loaded Duke into his truck, he found himself reluctant to leave. There was something refreshing about Jenna Miller. No pretense, no agenda, just honest kindness. "Maybe I could stop by sometime," he heard himself saying. "Check how you're doing. Make sure Duke can thank you properly." Jenna looked surprised but nodded. "He's welcome any time, you both are." Driving away, Blake kept glancing in the rearview mirror at the small figure standing on the porch. For the first time in months, he felt a flutter of something unexpected, something that had nothing to do with business deals or social obligations. Duke nudged his hand as if sensing his thoughts. "Yeah, I like her too, buddy," Blake murmured, turning onto the main road that would take them back to their world of wealth and privilege, a world that suddenly felt a little emptier than before. Blake couldn't stop thinking about Jenna Miller in the days that followed. While Duke recovered at home, Blake found himself distracted during meetings, his mind wandering to the small farmhouse with its leaky roof and the woman who had refused his money. "Earth to Blake," Victoria said, snapping her fingers in front of his face during lunch at the country club. "You haven't heard a word I've said." "Sorry," Blake said, focusing on his fiancée. "What were you saying?" Victoria sighed dramatically. "The wedding planner needs to know if we're having the ceremony at the country club or Montgomery Ranch. Personally, I think the club makes more sense. The ranch is so rustic." Blake frowned. Montgomery Ranch had been in his family for 4 generations. The idea of not getting married there had never occurred to him. The ranch has always been where Montgomery weddings take place, he said. My parents got married under the old oak by the lake. Victoria wrinkled her nose. Outside? Blake, I'm wearing a designer gown that costs more than most people's cars. I'm not standing in dirt. It's not dirt, it's... Blake stopped himself, realizing this wasn't the real issue. Let's talk about this later. I need to head back to check. On Duke. That dog again, Victoria muttered. I've been thinking, Blake, after the wedding, maybe we should consider finding Duke a new home. One of your ranch hands would probably love to take him. Blake stared at her. Duke isn't going anywhere, Victoria. He's family. He's a dog, Victoria countered. And I'm allergic. Since when? Since always. I just never mentioned it because I know how attached you are to him. But living together with that animal would be impossible for me. Blake's jaw tightened. We'll talk about this later, he repeated, standing up. I need to go. As he drove back to the ranch, Blake's thoughts returned to Jenna. She had treated Duke with such care, such genuine kindness. He couldn't imagine her suggesting that he give up his dog. Without fully thinking it through, Blake found himself turning down the road that led to the Miller farm. He told himself he just wanted to thank her again, maybe check if she needed anything for Duke's care. As he pulled into the driveway, he spotted Jenna in the vegetable garden, kneeling in the dirt as she harvested something. She looked up at the sound of his truck, surprise evident on her face. Mr. Montgomery, she said, standing and wiping her hands on her jeans. Is everything okay with Duke? Blake, please, he corrected, getting out of his truck. Duke jumped, down after him, his leg almost fully healed. And yes, he's doing great. The vet says you did an excellent job with his initial care. Jenna smiled, kneeling to greet Duke, who bounded over to her, tail wagging. Hello again, handsome. I'm glad. You're feeling better. I hope you don't mind us dropping by, Blake said, suddenly feeling awkward. What was he doing here? I was in the neighborhood. Jenna raised an eyebrow. 20 miles from your ranch is in the neighborhood? Blake chuckled, caught in the lie. Okay, not exactly, but Duke really wanted to see you again. Is that so? Jenna looked skeptical but amused. Well, since you're here, would you like some iced tea? I just made some. Blake accepted gratefully, following her to a small table on the porch where they sat while Duke explored, the yard sniffing with great interest at every new scent. Your farm is lovely, Blake said, looking out over the modest property. It's seen better days, Jenna admitted. Dad always had big plans for improvements, but there was never enough money. Now I'm just trying to keep it from falling apart completely. What do you grow here? Blake asked, genuinely curious. A bit of everything. Vegetables for the farmer's market, some feed corn for the animals. Nothing fancy, but it pays the bills. Most months anyway. She glanced at the roof, where several missing shingles were visible. Blake followed her gaze. That storm did a number on your roof. The storm just made it worse. It's been needing replacement for years. Jenna shrugged. I'll get to it when I can. Blake wanted to offer help, but sensed she wouldn't accept charity. You know, I have a crew coming to repair some storm damage at the ranch next week. They might have time to take a look at your roof, since they'll be in the area anyway. Jenna eyed him suspiciously. Is this another attempt at paying me for finding Duke? No, Blake said honestly. This is one neighbor helping another. Neighbors, are we? Jenna said with a small smile. Last I checked, Montgomery Ranch was on the other side of the county. Well, maybe not neighbors geographically, Blake admitted, but in spirit. Their conversation flowed easily after that. Blake found himself talking about the ranch, his plans for expanding the organic section, his love of the land, things he rarely discussed with Victoria, who had little interest in the actual workings of the ranch beyond its financial value. You really love it, don't you? Jenna observed. The ranch, I mean. It's in my blood, Blake nodded. My great-grandfather started with just 20 acres and a few cattle. Now it's one of the largest operations in the state. But it's more than a business to me, it's home. I understand that, Jenna said softly. This place isn't much, but I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. Blake found himself studying her face. the light dusting of freckles across her nose, the way her eyes crinkled slightly when she smiled. There was something so authentic about her, so unlike the polished, calculated people in his social circle. The ringing of his phone broke the moment. Victoria again. "Sorry," he said, standing to take the call. "I should get this." Jenna nodded, collecting their empty glasses and heading inside to give him privacy. "Yes, Victoria," Blake answered, watching as Duke followed Jenna into the house like an old friend. "Where are you?" "I stopped by the ranch, and Frank said you left hours ago." "I had an errand to run," Blake said vaguely. "Well, hurry back." "Mother wants us to look at flower arrangements for the reception." Victoria's voice was all business. "And don't forget, we have dinner with the Prestons tonight, 7 sharp." "Right," Blake sighed. "I'll be there." When he ended the call, Jenna had returned to the porch. "Duty calls?" she asked with a knowing smile. "Something like that," Blake replied. "I should probably get going." "Of course." Jenna whistled for Duke, who came bounding out of the house. "You've got important people to see." There was no judgment in her voice, just a simple statement of fact. But Blake felt a strange reluctance to return to his world of obligations and appearances. "Would it be okay if I stopped by again sometime?" he found himself asking. "Maybe I could bring those roofers by to take a look." Jenna hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that. And Duke is always welcome too." As Blake drove away, Duke sitting contentedly beside him, he realized he'd spent 2 hours at the Miller farm and hadn't once thought about business, wedding plans, or any of the other pressures that usually consumed his thoughts. For the first time in months, he'd just been himself. Victoria Sterling was not a woman accustomed to being ignored. As the only daughter of Gerald Sterling, she had been raised to believe that the world revolved around her desires. When Blake missed their dinner with the Prestons that evening, arriving an hour late with vague excuses about ranch business, her suspicions were immediately aroused. "You smell like dog," she commented as they left the restaurant later. "I thought Duke was staying in the guest house until his leg healed." "He's doing better," Blake said, avoiding the real issue. "Almost back to normal." Victoria studied his face. "You seem different lately, distracted." "Just busy," Blake assured her. "Lot on my mind with the expansion plans." But Victoria wasn't satisfied. The next morning, she made a call to her father's assistant. "Margie, I need you to look into something for me. Blake's been acting strangely since his dog went missing. I want to know where the dog was found and by whom." Within hours, Victoria had her answer. A woman named Jenna Miller had found Duke and returned him to Blake. According to Margie's research, Jenna's farm was on the verge of foreclosure, 3 months behind on payments to Sterling Bank. "How interesting," Victoria murmured, a plan already forming in her mind. Over the next 2 weeks, Blake found more and more reasons to visit the Miller farm. First, he brought the roofing crew as promised, insisting on paying for the materials as a thank you for Jenna's care of Duke. Then he stopped by with some tomato plants he thought might do well in her garden. Another day, he brought lunch and helped her fix a broken fence. Each visit left him feeling more relaxed, more himself. Jenna never asked about his wealth or his social connections. She treated him like any other man, challenging his opinions, laughing at his jokes, sharing stories about her childhood on the farm. Duke thrived in these visits too, following Jenna everywhere, helping her collect eggs from the chicken coop, or simply lying at her feet while she and Blake talked on the porch. "Your dog has developed quite the crush on me," Jenna teased one afternoon as Duke rested his head on her lap. "Can't really blame him," Blake replied without thinking, then felt his face grow warm at what he'd implied. Jenna blushed slightly, but smiled. "You Montgomerys are quite the charmers." "My father certainly thought so," Blake laughed. "Mom used to say he could talk the birds out of the trees." "You must miss them," Jenna said softly. Blake had told her about losing both parents, his mother to cancer 7 years ago, his father to a heart attack just 3 years later. "Every day," Blake nodded. "But especially lately, Dad would have known what to do about—" He trailed off, not ready to voice the doubts that had been growing about his engagement to Victoria. "About what?" Jenna prompted gently. Blake shook his head. Nothing important, just business stuff. Jenna clearly didn't believe him but didn't push. That was another thing he appreciated about her. She never demanded more than he was ready to give. As Blake drove home that evening, Duke sleeping in the passenger seat, he realized with a jolt that he was falling for Jenna Miller. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. He was engaged to Victoria. Their families had expectations. The merger of the Montgomery and Sterling empires was practically a done deal. But for the first time, Blake was questioning whether any of that mattered compared to how he felt when he was with Jenna. Jenna wasn't naive. She knew that whatever was happening between her and Blake Montgomery couldn't last. He was engaged to Victoria Sterling, daughter of the man who owned the bank that was threatening to take her farm. He lived in a world of wealth and privilege that she could never be part of. And yet every time his truck appeared in her driveway, her heart leapt. Every conversation, every shared laugh, every moment spent working side by side drew her further into dangerous territory. "You're being ridiculous," she told herself firmly as she mucked out the cow stalls one morning. "He's just being kind because you helped his dog. Nothing more." But then she'd remember the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't, noticing the way their hands had brushed when passing tools and neither had pulled away. The comfortable silence they could share, just sitting on her porch watching the sunset. Even if he did feel something, what then? She muttered to Penny, her old horse. "I'm not leaving the farm and he's not leaving his empire." Penny snorted as if in agreement. Jenna was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the car approaching until it was right outside the barn. Expecting Blake, she stepped out with a smile that quickly faded when she saw the sleek silver luxury car parked in her driveway. A tall, immaculately dressed blonde woman emerged, designer sunglasses hiding, her eyes high heels. Completely impractical for a farm. "Jenna Miller?" the woman asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Yes," Jenna replied, suddenly conscious of her dirty work clothes and messy hair. "Can I help you?" The woman removed her sunglasses, revealing cold blue eyes that assessed Jenna with clinical precision. "I'm Victoria Sterling, Blake Montgomery's fiancée." Jenna's stomach dropped. "I know who you are, Miss Sterling." "Good. Then we can skip the introductions." Victoria glanced around the modest farm with barely concealed distaste. "Blake tells me you found his dog." "Duke." "Yes." Jenna crossed her arms defensively. "Is there something I can help you with, Ms. Sterling?" Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I think we should talk, woman to woman." Against her better judgment, Jenna led Victoria to the house, offering her a seat at the kitchen table. Victoria perched on the edge of the chair as if afraid to touch too much of it. "I'll be direct, Ms. Miller. I know Blake has been visiting you." Jenna kept her expression neutral. "He's been helping with some repairs. I couldn't afford to fix my roof after the storm." "How generous of him," Victoria said with a brittle smile, "but we both know it's more than that." "I don't know what you mean." "Please." Victoria waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Blake has been distracted, unavailable, and making excuses. It doesn't take a genius to figure out where he's been spending his time." Jenna's cheeks flushed with anger. "If you have concerns about your fiancé's behavior, you should talk to him, not me." "Oh, I intend to. But first, I wanted to speak with..." "So you..." Victoria leaned forward. "Do you know that your farm is 3 months behind on its mortgage payments? To Sterling Bank." Jenna stiffened. "What does that have to do with anything?" "My father is very understanding about these things usually." "But business is business, unless..." Victoria let the word hang in the air. "Unless what?" Jenna asked, though she already knew where this was heading. "Unless you stop whatever this friendship is with Blake." Victoria's voice hardened. "Blake? Montgomery belongs in my world, Ms. Miller. A world of influence and connections that someone like you could never understand. Whatever fantasy you've been entertaining ends now." Jenna stood up, anger coursing through her. "I think you should leave." Victoria remained seated. "You misunderstand me. I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you a way out. Stop seeing Blake. And I'll personally make sure your loan is restructured. You can keep your precious farm." She smiled coldly. "Or don't, and face foreclosure next month. Your choice." "My relationship with Blake is none of your business," Jenna said firmly. "Everything about Blake is my business. Victoria replied, standing to face Jenna. "We've been engaged for months. Our wedding is planned. Our families are joining forces in ways that will benefit the entire county. I won't let some farm girl disrupt that because she bathed his dog." The crude dismissal stung, but Jenna kept her composure. "Blake makes his own decisions." "Does he?" Victoria laughed. "Blake has responsibilities, obligations. His name means something in this community. Do you really think he'd throw all that away for someone who can't even pay her bills?" Before Jenna could respond, the sound of tires on gravel drew both women's attention to the window. Blake's truck was pulling into the driveway. Victoria's smile turned triumphant. "Perfect timing. Now we can all have an honest conversation." Jenna's heart raced as Blake approached the house, Duke bounding ahead of him. The dog burst through the door that Jenna had left ajar, skidding to a halt when he saw Victoria. His tail, which had been wagging furiously, dropped immediately. "Smart dog," Jenna thought grimly. Blake appeared in the doorway a moment later, his expression changing from cheerful to shocked as he took in the scene before him. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing, darling," Victoria replied smoothly. "When you said you had ranch business this afternoon, I assumed you meant at your ranch, not—" She gestured vaguely at Jenna's kitchen. "Here." Blake's eyes moved to Jenna, concern evident. "Jenna, are you okay?" The question, directed at her rather than his fiancée, wasn't lost on Victoria, whose smile tightened. "She's fine, Blake. We were just having a little chat about boundaries, weren't we, Ms. Miller?" "Victoria, what did you say to her?" Blake demanded, his voice low. "Nothing that isn't true," Victoria replied coolly. "That we're engaged, that your family has obligations, that your little diversion here needs to end before people start talking." Blake's face flushed with anger. "My diversion? Is that what you think this is?" "What else would it be?" Victoria laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Really, Blake, look around you." She gestured at the modest kitchen with its worn countertops and outdated appliances. "This isn't your world, you're slumming it, having a little pre-wedding adventure. It's time to come back to reality." Duke had moved to Jenna's side, pressing against her leg protectively. She rested her hand on his head, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I think you should both leave," Jenna said quietly. "This is my home, and I won't have it turned into a battleground." Blake stepped toward her. "Jenna, please, I didn't know she was coming here." "It doesn't matter," Jenna said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Ms. Sterling is right about one thing. This isn't your world, Blake. And I was foolish to let myself forget that even for a moment." "Listen to her, Blake," Victoria said, placing a hand on his arm. "She understands the situation better than I expected." Blake shook off Victoria's hand, his eyes never leaving Jenna's face. "This isn't about worlds or social status or any of that nonsense. This is about—" "Don't," Jenna interrupted, unable to bear hearing whatever he might say. "Please, just go." Victoria smiled triumphantly. "You heard her, Blake. Let's go." For a moment, Blake looked like he might refuse. Then Duke whined softly, sensing the tension in the room, and Blake's shoulders sagged in defeat. "This isn't over, Jenna," he said quietly. "We need to talk." "I think we've all said enough," Jenna replied, turning away so he wouldn't see the tears threatening to spill. Victoria took Blake's arm, practically pulling him toward the door. "The Harrisons are expecting us for drinks at 6. We need to change." Blake allowed himself to be led out, but at the door he stopped and looked back at Jenna. "I'll call you," he promised. After they left, Jenna sank into a chair, her composure finally breaking. Duke, who had somehow stayed behind in the confusion, rested his head on her lap, offering silent comfort as she cried. "What am I doing, Duke?" she whispered, stroking his soft fur. "Falling for a man who's engaged to someone else, who lives in a completely different world. I must be crazy." Duke whined sympathetically, his brown eyes full of understanding. "And now I've dragged you into this mess too," Jenna sniffled, noticing that the dog had chosen to stay with her rather than follow Blake. "He's going to wonder where you are." As if on cue, her phone rang. Blake's number flashed on the screen. Jenna hesitated, then answered. "He's here," she said without preamble. Duke stayed behind. "I know," Blake replied, his voice tight. I'm coming back for him, alone. Before Jenna could protest, he'd hung up. 20 minutes later, his truck pulled into her driveway again. Jenna stepped onto the porch, Duke at her side. Blake approached slowly, his face drawn with emotion. "Victoria's gone back to town," he said. "I told her I needed time to think." Jenna nodded, unsure what to say. Duke moved forward to greet his owner, and Blake knelt to ruffle the dog's ears. "Smart boy staying here," he murmured to Duke. "You knew exactly what you were doing, didn't you?" Looking up at Jenna, Blake's expression was earnest. "I'm sorry about Victoria showing up like that. Whatever she said to you, she told me the truth," Jenna interrupted. "That you're engaged, that your families have plans, that I'm jeopardizing all of that." Blake stood, taking a step toward her. "Is that all she said?" Jenna hesitated, then added, "She mentioned my mortgage, that Sterling Bank could foreclose or be more accommodating depending on my choices." Blake's face darkened with anger. "She threatened you with foreclosure?" "It doesn't matter," Jenna said wearily. "She's right, Blake. Whatever's been happening between us these past weeks, it can't go anywhere. You know that as well as I do." "Don't tell me what I know," Blake said, his voice unexpectedly fierce. "These past few weeks with you have been the most real, the most honest time I've had in years. You see me, Jenna, not my name, not my money, just me." His words made her heart ache with longing, but Jenna forced herself to stay strong. "And what about Victoria? Your engagement? The merger of your families that everyone in the county seems to know about?" "I didn't choose any of that," Blake admitted. "It was expected, the logical next step. The Montgomery and Sterling families joining forces." "But you went along with it," Jenna pointed out. "You proposed to her." Blake ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I did. And until I met you, I thought it was the right thing to do. But now—" Hope fluttered in Jenna's chest, but she squashed it down. "Blake, I can't be the reason you break an engagement. I won't be that person." "This isn't about you, not really," Blake said earnestly. "It's about me finally being honest with myself, about what I want, who I want to be with." He stepped closer, close enough that Jenna could see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. "I need time to figure things out, to do things right. But I need you to know that what's happening between us is real to me, more real than anything in my life right now." Jenna wanted desperately to believe him, but Victoria's words echoed in her mind. "And what happens when you figure things out? Do I fit into your world, Blake? Do you fit into mine?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I want the chance to find out." Before Jenna could respond, Duke barked sharply, alerting them to another vehicle approaching. They both turned to see a Sterling Bank car pulling into the driveway. "Now what?" Jenna muttered. A middle-aged man in a business suit emerged, carrying a folder. "Ms. Miller?" "Raymond Edwards, Sterling Bank. I have some paperwork regarding your mortgage that needs immediate attention." Blake stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Jenna. "What kind of paperwork, Mr. Edwards?" The banker looked startled to find Blake Montgomery on the Miller farm. "Mr. Montgomery, sir, I didn't expect to see you here." "Obviously," Blake replied dryly. "What's going on with Ms. Miller's mortgage?" Edwards shifted uncomfortably. "Well, sir, Ms. Miller is several months behind on payments. Standard procedure is to begin foreclosure proceedings." "Standard procedure," Blake repeated flatly. "And did Gerald Sterling personally tell you to come out here today? Or was it Victoria?" The banker's silence was answer enough. "That's what I thought," Blake said. "Mr. Edwards, Ms. Miller will be bringing her account current next week. In the meantime, I suggest you return to the bank and tell Gerald that if he wants to discuss the Miller property, he can call me directly." "Yes, sir." Edwards nodded quickly, retreating to his car without another word. When the banker had driven away, Jenna turned to Blake, anger replacing her earlier vulnerability. "I don't need you fighting my battles, Blake, or paying my mortgage." "I know you don't," Blake assured her. "But Victoria's using her family's power to punish you for something that isn't your fault. I won't stand for that." "And what about tomorrow, or next week, or next month?" Jenna challenged. "Will you not stand for every attempt they make to push me out? Because they won't stop, Blake, not until they get what they want." "Then I'll have to make it very clear what I want," Blake said, determination hardening his features. "And it isn't a business merger disguised as a marriage." Despite her resolve to stay strong, Jenna felt a flicker of hope at his words. "What are you going to do?" First, I'm going to have a long overdue conversation with Victoria, Blake said. Then with her father. After that, he reached out to take Jenna's hand, his touch sending warmth through her despite her best efforts to remain detached. After that, I hope you'll give me a chance to show you that some things are worth fighting for. Jenna looked down at their joined hands, then up at Blake's earnest face. I can't promise anything, Blake. This is all happening so fast. I know, he nodded. I'm not asking for promises. Just don't give up on me yet. Duke nudged between them, pressing against both their legs as if trying to keep them together. See? Blake smiled. Duke votes yes. Despite everything, Jenna found herself smiling back. Duke also eats out of the trash when he thinks no one is looking. His judgment is questionable at best. Blake laughed, and for a moment the tension between them eased. Then his expression grew serious again. I should go. I have a lot to sort out. Okay, Jenna nodded, reluctantly letting go of his hand. Duke, Blake called, and the dog looked up at him, then back, at Jenna, clearly torn. It's okay, buddy, we'll be back. With a final lingering look at Jenna, Blake turned and walked to his truck, Duke following reluctantly behind. As they drove away, Jenna wrapped her arms around herself, already missing his presence. Don't get your hopes up, she warned herself. This isn't a fairy tale. But as she watched Blake's truck disappear down the road, Jenna couldn't help feeling that her quiet, predictable life had just been turned upside down. And despite all the complications, all the reasons it couldn't possibly work, a small part of her was terrified that she was already falling in love with Blake Montgomery. Victoria Sterling was waiting in Blake's living room when he returned to the ranch that evening. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped impatiently against her glass of wine as Duke trotted past her without so much as a glance. That dog still doesn't like me, she observed coolly, even after all these months. Duke's a good judge of character, Blake replied, too tired for pretense. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Are we really going to do this now, after the scene at that farm? I think we have to. Blake poured himself a drink and sat in the chair across from her. This isn't working, Victoria. It hasn't been for a while. Because of her? Victoria's voice dripped with disdain. That dirt-poor farmer who can barely keep her pathetic little homestead running? This isn't about Jenna, Blake said firmly. It's about us. About the fact that you threatened to foreclose on her farm if she didn't stay away from me. Victoria shrugged, unapologetic. I was protecting our future, something you seem remarkably unconcerned about lately. Our future, Blake repeated. A future where you dictate who I can see, where I can go, what I can do with my own ranch. Where you try to make me give up my dog because he's inconvenient. Don't be so dramatic, Victoria scoffed. I'm thinking about what's best for both of us. The Sterling-Montgomery merger will make us the most powerful family in the county. Isn't that what you want? Is that what this is to you? Blake asked, quietly. A merger? Victoria sighed impatiently. It's a partnership, Blake, one that makes sense. We come from the same world, the same background. We understand each other. Do we? Blake leaned forward. Because I don't think you understand me at all, Victoria. You've never wanted to know about the ranch beyond its value. You've never asked about my dreams or plans beyond how they fit into your vision for our life. And this farmer does? Victoria laughed incredulously. Please, she's infatuated with your money and status, just like every other woman who's ever pursued you. She didn't pursue me, Blake corrected. She didn't even want a reward for saving Duke, and in all the time we've spent together, she's never once asked about my money or my business. How convenient, Victoria sneered. The perfect little saint. Blake shook his head. She's not perfect. She's real, authentic, something I haven't experienced in a long time. Victoria stood up, anger finally breaking through her polished facade. You can't be serious, Blake. You're throwing away everything. Our engagement, our family's plans, your reputation for some hobby farmer you've known for a month. I'm not throwing anything away, Blake said, also standing. I'm finally being honest. With you, with myself. This engagement was a mistake from the beginning. We want different things, Victoria. Like what? She demanded. Like a real partnership. Someone who sees me as more than just the Montgomery name and fortune. Someone who understands why the ranch matters to me, why Duke matters to me. Victoria's laugh was bitter. And you think this Jenna person is that someone? Wake up, Blake. She's nobody. If you leave me for her, you'll be a laughingstock. My father. He'll pull all his investments from Montgomery Ranch. He'll make sure everyone in our circle knows exactly how you betrayed our family. Is that a threat? Blake asked calmly. It's a reality check. Victoria collected her purse. Take some time to think about what you're risking. When you come to your senses, call me. She headed for the door, adding, And Blake, if you think that farm girl won't take your money once it's offered, you're even more naive than I thought. After Victoria left, Blake sank back into his chair, emotionally drained. Duke padded over and rested his head on Blake's knee. Did I do the right thing, buddy? Blake murmured, scratching behind Duke's ears. Breaking things off with Victoria? Duke's tail wagged slightly as if in approval. Yeah, I think so too, Blake sighed. But she's right about one thing. Gerald Sterling won't take this lying down, and I don't want Jenna caught in the crossfire. The back. Next morning, Blake called Frank into his office. The ranch foreman had been with the Montgomery family for over 20 years and was one of the few people Blake trusted completely. I need you to look into something for me, Frank. Discreetly. Sure thing, boss, Frank nodded. What is it? Find out everything you can about Jenna Miller's mortgage with Sterling Bank. How much she owes, what the terms are. Frank raised an eyebrow but didn't question the request. I'll make some calls, but you know how tight Gerald Sterling runs that bank. Might not be easy to get details. Do your best, Blake said. And Frank? Not a word about this to anyone, especially Victoria. Trouble in paradise? Frank asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. You could say that. We ended things last night. Frank nodded, unsurprised. Can't say I'm sorry to hear it. That woman never did seem right for you. He hesitated, then asked, This have anything to do with Ms. Miller, the one who found Duke? Maybe, Blake admitted. But that's not why I'm looking into her mortgage. Victoria made some threats and I want to make sure Jenna's protected. Understood. Frank headed for the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, boss, I've seen how you've been these past few weeks. Happier. More like yourself. Whatever's causing that, well, I'd say it's worth fighting for. After Frank left, Blake spent the morning reviewing the ranch's finances. If Gerald Sterling made good on Victoria's threats to pull his investments, Blake needed to be prepared. The ranch was profitable, but expanding into organic operations had tied up significant capital. Without the Sterling bank loans, things would be tight for the next year. Just before noon, his phone rang. It was Jenna. Hey, he answered, surprised but pleased. I was going to call you later. I think we need to talk, Jenna said, her voice serious. In person. Can you come by the farm? Of course, Blake replied, concern immediately rising. Is everything okay? Just come when you can. Jenna hung up before he could ask more questions. 40 minutes later, Blake pulled into Jenna's driveway, Duke riding shotgun as usual. The dog's excitement was obvious. He practically launched himself out of the truck window as they approached the farmhouse. Jenna was waiting on the porch, tension evident in her posture. As Blake approached, he noticed she was holding a letter. What's wrong? He asked, climbing the steps to join her. Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. It was from Sterling Bank, formally notifying her that her mortgage was being called due in full within 30 days. They can't do this, Blake said after reading it. Your mortgage agreement doesn't allow for this kind of accelerated repayment. Apparently. There's a clause about bank discretion when the loan holder is significantly in arrears, Jenna replied bitterly. Gerald Sterling's discretion in this case. Blake's jaw tightened. This is because of me, because of Victoria. I'd say that's a safe bet, Jenna agreed, taking the letter back. The banker who delivered this, in person by the way, made it pretty clear. What did he say? Blake demanded. That some relationships come with consequences. Jenna's eyes met his. Blake, I can't fight this. Even if I had the money to get a lawyer, Sterling Bank owns half the county. No one would take my case. Blake paced the porch, anger building. I'll talk to Gerald, make him see reason. And say what? Jenna asked. That he should ignore his daughter's broken engagement, that he should do you a favor for the woman you left Victoria for. Blake stopped pacing. Is that what you think? That I left Victoria for you? Jenna flushed. I think your timing makes it look that way. To them, at least. I ended things with Victoria because it wasn't right. It never was. You just helped me see that more clearly. Blake moved closer, taking Jenna's hands in his. But yes, my feelings for you were part of it. I can't deny that. Jenna looked down at their joined hands. Blake, I don't know what to do. I can't lose this farm. It's all I have left of my family. You won't lose it, Blake promised. I'll fix this. How? Jenna pulled her hands away. By paying off my mortgage? That's exactly what Victoria said would happen, that I'd end up taking your money after all. This isn't about money, Jenna. It's about what's right. Victoria and her father are using their power to punish you because of me. I can't let that happen. And I can't be indebted to you, Jenna countered. Don't you see? If you pay off my mortgage, I'll never know if what's between us is real or if I'm just grateful to the man who saved my farm. Blake ran a hand through his hair in frustration. So what then? We let Gerald Sterling take your family home to satisfy his daughter's wounded pride? I don't know, Jenna admitted, tears welling in her eyes. But I know I need to fight this myself. Blake wanted to argue, but recognized the same independent spirit that had first drawn him to her. Instead, he asked, will you at least let me help you find a lawyer? Someone outside the Sterling Bank influence? After a moment, Jenna nodded. Okay, but that's it, Blake. No money, no Montgomery name pulling strings. Promise me. I promise, Blake agreed reluctantly. But Jenna, I need you to know something. Whatever happens with the farm, with the Sterlings, my feelings for you are real. The most real thing in my life right now. Jenna's expression softened. Mine too, she admitted quietly. That's why this is so hard. I never expected you, Blake Montgomery. You and your troublemaking dog. She smiled down at Duke, who was watching them both attentively. For what it's worth, Blake said, Duke thinks we're perfect together. Is that right? Jenna laughed softly. And what does Duke suggest we do about Sterling Bank? Probably something involving burying their paperwork in the backyard, Blake joked, relieved to see her smile. As if understanding, Duke barked once, tail wagging. For a moment they stood together on the porch, the weight of the situation temporarily lifted by shared laughter. Then Jenna sighed, her smile fading. Seriously, Blake, what are we going to do? First step, find you a good lawyer, Blake said. I have a college friend who practices in the next county. He won't be intimidated by the Sterling name. And after that, Jenna asked. One step at a time, Blake replied. But whatever comes next, we face it together. If you want to, that is. Jenna considered him for a long moment. I'd like that, she finally said. Together. Gerald Sterling was not a man accustomed to being defied. As president of Sterling Bank and one of the wealthiest men in the county, his word was usually law. When Blake Montgomery requested a meeting, Gerald assumed it was to apologize for the misunderstanding with Victoria and get the engagement back on track. He was sorely mistaken. Let me get this straight, Gerald said, leaning back in his plush office chair. You're asking me to extend special consideration to the woman who's the reason my daughter's engagement has been called off. That's not why I ended things with Victoria, and you know it, Blake replied evenly. Jenna Miller is an innocent party in all this. Gerald's laugh was cold. Innocent? Please, Blake. She saw an opportunity with a wealthy man and took it. Can't blame her, really. That ramshackle farm of hers is hardly turning a profit. You're wrong about her, Blake said, keeping his temper in check with effort. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because Sterling Bank is abusing its power to punish someone without cause. Without cause? Gerald's eyebrows rose. Ms. Miller is significantly behind on her payments. The bank is well within its rights to protect its investment. By calling in the entire mortgage with 30 days' notice? That's not standard practice, and you know it, Gerald shrugged. Banking is full of technicalities. Perhaps Ms. Miller should have read the fine print more carefully. Blake leaned forward. I've seen the fine print, Gerald. My lawyer has too. The clause you're using was designed for cases of fraud or criminal activity, not late payments. Your lawyer. Gerald's expression hardened. Bringing lawyers into this seems rather extreme, don't you think? Not as extreme as foreclosing on a woman's family home because your daughter is upset, Blake countered. Careful. Blake, Gerald warned. Montgomery Ranch has enjoyed a very favorable relationship with Sterling Bank over the years. It would be a shame if that were to change. Is that a threat? Blake asked, though he knew the answer. A business reality, Gerald corrected. The Montgomery-Sterling merger made financial sense for both families. Without it, he spread his hands, things become more complicated. Blake nodded slowly. I understand. So here's a business reality for you, Gerald. If Sterling Bank proceeds with this unjustified foreclosure, Montgomery Ranch will not only take all of its considerable business elsewhere, but will also file a formal complaint with federal banking regulators about Sterling Bank's predatory lending practices. Gerald's smile faltered. You wouldn't dare. I would, Blake confirmed. And not just regarding Jenna Miller's case. My lawyer has been looking into several other questionable foreclosures by Sterling Bank over the past 5 years. Patterns are emerging, Gerald. Patterns that regulators would find very interesting. The older man's face flushed with anger. You're bluffing. Blake slid a folder across the desk. See for yourself. Gerald didn't touch the folder. Victoria was right about you. You've changed. Maybe I have, Blake acknowledged. Or maybe I've finally become the man I was always meant to be. And this farmer is the reason? Gerald scoffed. What would your father say, Blake? Richard Montgomery was a businessman first. He understood the importance of strategic alliances. My father taught me to stand up for what's right, Blake said, rising from his chair. So that's what I'm doing. You'll regret this, Gerald warned. Montgomery Ranch needs Sterling Bank more than you realize. Maybe, Blake conceded. But I'd regret not fighting for Jenna more. He headed for the door, then turned back. You have until the end of the week to rescind that foreclosure notice, Gerald. After that, the complaint goes to the regulators. As he left Sterling Bank, Blake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd made his choice, drawn his line in the sand. Whatever came next, he'd face it with a clear conscience, and hopefully, with Jenna by his side. Jenna spent the days following the foreclosure notice in a state of anxious determination. She'd met with Blake's lawyer friend, a sharp-minded woman named Rachel Carpenter, who specialized in predatory lending cases. Rachel had been guardedly optimistic about fighting the foreclosure, but warned that it wouldn't be easy. Sterling Bank has a lot of influence, she'd cautioned. We'll need to build a strong case. While Rachel gathered documents and precedents, Jenna threw herself into farm work, as if keeping busy could somehow keep the fear at bay. She was replacing a section of fence when Blake's truck appeared on the horizon. Duke was the first out, bounding across the field to greet her with enthusiastic barks. Blake followed at a more measured pace, but the smile on his face gave Jenna hope. Good news, she asked as he reached her. Maybe, Blake said cautiously. I met with Gerald Sterling this morning. Jenna's stomach tightened. And I gave him until the end of the week to rescind the foreclosure notice. Just like that? Jenna raised an eyebrow skeptically. What did you threaten him with? Blake grinned. Who says I threatened him? Blake! Jenna crossed her arms. What did you do? Rachel found some inconsistencies in Sterling Bank's foreclosure practices, patterns that suggest they might be targeting certain types of borrowers unfairly. I simply pointed out that federal regulators might be interested in those patterns. You blackmailed Gerald Sterling. Jenna was simultaneously impressed and horrified. I prefer to think of it as leveraging mutually assured destruction, Blake replied with a shrug. If he comes after you, we come after his bank's reputation, Jenna shook her head, a reluctant smile forming. Montgomery family politics at work, huh? Something like that. Blake grew serious. I know you wanted to fight this yourself, Jenna. But Gerald Sterling plays dirty. We needed to match his tactics. We? Jenna questioned, though the word brought a warmth to her chest. Yes, we. Blake took her hands. Unless you don't want there to be a we. Jenna looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his hopeful face. "I do," she admitted softly. "But Blake, even if Gerald backs off, nothing has really changed. You're still Blake Montgomery, and I'm still just Jenna Miller with her struggling farm." "You're not just anything," Blake said firmly. "You're the woman who saved my dog, who refused a reward out of principle, who showed me what real kindness looks like. You're the woman I'm falling in love with, Jenna." The declaration hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. "Blake," Jenna began, her heart racing. "This is happening so fast. A month ago you were engaged to Victoria. A month ago I was living someone else's idea of my life," Blake corrected. "And then Duke got lost in a storm and you found him, and somehow I found myself too." Duke barked, as if in agreement, making them both laugh. "Even Duke thinks we're meant to be," Blake said, smiling. "Duke also thinks squirrels are personally insulting him from the trees," Jenna pointed out. "His judgment is suspect." "Maybe," Blake acknowledged, "but mine isn't. I know what I feel, Jenna. I've never been more certain of anything." Before Jenna could respond, the sound of an approaching vehicle drew their attention. A dark SUV was coming, up the driveway, moving fast enough to kick up a cloud of dust. More Sterling Bank representatives? Jenna guessed grimly. "Too soon," Blake frowned. "Gerald hasn't had time to decide whether to back down yet." The SUV came to a stop, and Victoria. Sterling emerged, her expression thunderous. Duke immediately moved closer to Jenna, a low growl forming in his throat. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Victoria called, striding toward them. "The farmer and the rancher playing house." "Victoria," Blake said calmly, "this isn't the time or place." "Oh? When would be a better time to discuss the fact that you threatened my father?" Victoria demanded, stopping a few feet away. "That you're trying to destroy our family's bank because of her?" She gestured dismissively at Jenna. "Your father is using the bank to punish Jenna for something that isn't her fault," Blake replied. "That's wrong, and you know it." Victoria scoffed. "Please, she knew exactly what she was doing, coming between us." "I never tried to come between anyone," Jenna protested. "Blake and I became friends because of Duke. That's all it was at first." "At first," Victoria repeated mockingly. "How convenient. And now he's fighting your battles, threatening my family's business." She turned to Blake. "Do you have any idea what you've done? My father is furious. He's calling in every loan Montgomery Ranch has with Sterling Bank." Blake's expression remained calm. "I expected as much." "You'll lose everything," Victoria warned. "The expansion, the new breeding program, maybe even parts of the ranch itself. Is she worth that to you?" Blake didn't hesitate. "Yes." The simple, confident response seemed to knock the wind out of Victoria's sails. For a moment, genuine hurt flashed across her face. "I don't understand," she said, her voice suddenly smaller. "We had everything planned, Blake. The perfect life." "Perfect. For who, Victoria?" Blake asked gently. "It was your vision, your plan. You never asked what I wanted." "Because I thought I knew," Victoria exclaimed. "Success, influence, status, those are the things that matter." "Not to me," Blake shook his head. "Not anymore." Victoria's gaze moved from Blake to Jenna, as if seeing her rival clearly for the first time. "What does she have that I don't? What could possibly be worth throwing away everything we built?" Jenna felt uncomfortable witnessing such a personal moment, but stood her ground. "This affected her life too." "She sees me," Blake said simply. "The real me, not the Montgomery name or fortune. She challenges me to be better, not for appearances or status, but because she believes in who I am." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "How romantic and utterly naive." She turned to Jenna. "You think you know him? You've known him for what, a month? I've been part of his world for years. You're a novelty, a distraction. When the real world pressures come, and they will. We'll see how long this farm fantasy lasts." "Maybe you're right," Jenna replied calmly. "Maybe this won't last. But that's for Blake and me to figure out, not you." Victoria seemed taken aback by Jenna's directness. She looked between them once more, then straightened her shoulders. "Fine. Destroy everything for this infatuation. But don't come crying to me when it all falls apart." She started walking back to her SUV, then stopped. "Oh, and Blake, my father asked me to deliver a message. You have until tomorrow, not the end of the week, to withdraw your threats. After that, Sterling Bank calls in every Montgomery loan after C. Victoria drove away. The silence felt heavy. Duke whined softly, sensing the tension. "Did you mean that?" Jenna asked quietly. "That I'm worth risking the ranch?" Blake turned to her, his expression serious. "The ranch is land and buildings and cattle, Jenna. Important, yes, but not more important than doing what's right. Not more important than how I feel about you." "And how exactly do you feel about me, Blake Montgomery?" Jenna asked, her heart in her throat. Blake stepped closer, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "I think I'm in love with you, Jenna Miller, and that terrifies me and thrills me all at once." Jenna swallowed hard. "That's good," she whispered, "because I think I'm in love with you too." Blake's smile was radiant. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, he leaned in and kissed her. It was gentle at first, then deeper as Jenna responded, her arms sliding around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both a little breathless, Duke barked happily, tail wagging at full speed. "Even Duke approves," Blake laughed. "Duke is easily bribed with treats," Jenna pointed out, though she was smiling too. "But Blake, what about Sterling Bank? Victoria said they're calling in your loans tomorrow." Blake's expression grew serious. "Again, let me worry about that. I've been making calls, looking at other financing options. It won't be easy, but Montgomery Ranch will survive." "And us?" Jenna asked, suddenly uncertain again. "What happens when the excitement fades and you're left with just me? A woman who can barely keep her small farm afloat?" "What happens," Blake said, taking both her hands in his, "is that we figure it out together, day by day. I don't have all the answers, Jenna. I just know that when I'm with you, everything makes sense in a way it never has before. Even with all the complications," Jenna pressed. "The Sterlings, the bank, are different worlds. Especially with all that." Blake nodded. "Because for the first time I'm fighting for something that matters to me, not just going along with what's expected." Jenna studied his face, searching for any sign of doubt. Finding none, she took a deep breath. Okay, Blake repeated. "Hopeful. Okay, let's figure it out together," Jenna clarified. "But Blake, promise me something. If this gets to be too much, if you start to regret what you're giving up—" "I won't," Blake interrupted firmly. "But if you do," Jenna insisted, "promise you'll be honest with me. No staying out of obligation or guilt." Blake nodded solemnly. "I promise, as long as you promise the same. No staying because you think you owe me something for helping with the farm or the mortgage." "Deal," Jenna agreed, sealing it with another kiss. As they stood together in the afternoon sun, Duke circling happily around their legs, neither knew exactly what challenges tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a very long time, both felt the hope of facing those challenges together. The next morning dawned bright and clear, but Blake's mind was clouded with worry as he prepared for his meeting with the bank. Gerald Sterling had made good on his threat, calling in all of Montgomery Ranch's loans with Sterling Bank. Blake had spent half the night on the phone with bankers from neighboring counties, trying to secure alternative financing. "You look like you haven't slept," Frank commented as Blake entered the ranch office, Duke following faithfully at his heels. "That's because I haven't," Blake admitted, setting down his coffee. "Any word from Peterson at First National?" Frank shook his head. "Not yet, but Callahan from Western Bank left a message. He's interested in talking." "Set up a meeting for tomorrow," Blake instructed. "And where are we with the paperwork for the East Pasture? If we need to sell off some land to keep the core operations running, that's our best option." "Already pulled the deeds," Frank said, placing a folder on Blake's desk. "But boss, are you sure about this? Selling Montgomery land is a big step." Blake sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not sure about any of this, Frank, but I won't let Gerald Sterling bully me or Jenna. If that means making some hard choices about the ranch, so be it." Frank nodded slowly. "Your father would be proud, you know. He always said a man should stand by his principles no matter the cost." "I hope you're right," Blake said, though doubt crept into his voice. His father had built Montgomery Ranch into what it was today. The thought of potentially losing parts of it made Blake's stomach churn. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Jenna. "Hey," he answered, his voice softening immediately. "Everything okay?" "I just got a call from Rachel," Jenna said, referring to the lawyer Blake had connected her with. She says there's been a formal complaint filed against Sterling Bank by several other homeowners with similar foreclosure situations. The State Banking Commission is launching an investigation. Blake straightened in his chair. That was fast. I didn't think the complaint would get traction so quickly. Rachel says it wasn't your complaint that triggered it, Jenna explained. Apparently this has been brewing for a while, but it might give us some leverage with Gerald. It's worth a shot, Blake agreed. I'm meeting with him at 11. This could change the whole conversation. Be careful, Jenna warned. Gerald Sterling doesn't strike me as a man who likes being cornered. I will, Blake promised. And Jenna, no matter what happens with the bank, with the ranch, we'll figure it out together, right? There was a brief pause before Jenna replied, her voice warm. Together. Now go show Gerald Sterling that he picked the wrong farmer to mess with. Blake hung up, feeling his resolve strengthen. Frank was watching him with a knowing smile. Ms. Miller seems good for you, the foreman observed. Haven't seen you stand up to the Sterlings like this, well, ever. She is good for me, Blake acknowledged. Better than I deserve, probably. Well, don't mess it up, Frank advised bluntly. Women like that don't come around often. Sergeant Gerald Sterling was already seated in the conference room when Blake arrived at Sterling Bank. The older man's usual polished appearance seemed slightly rumpled, as if he too had spent a restless night. Blake, Gerald greeted him curtly. I assume you're here to discuss the loan situation. Among other things, Blake replied, taking the seat across from him, including the State Banking Commission's new investigation into Sterling Bank's foreclosure practices. Gerald's face tightened almost imperceptibly. News travels fast. Small towns, Blake said with a shrug. So let's talk about how we move forward. Montgomery Ranch has been a Sterling Bank client for 3 generations. Do you really want to end that relationship over a personal grudge? This isn't personal, Gerald insisted. It's business. You threatened my bank. Actions have consequences. So do predatory lending practices, Blake countered. The investigation isn't going away, Gerald, whether you call in my loans or not, but we could work together to find a solution that benefits everyone. Gerald studied him for a moment. What exactly are you proposing? A compromise, Blake said. Montgomery Ranch will maintain its relationship with Sterling Bank for our existing operations. In return, you rescind the foreclosure notice on Jenna Miller's farm and offer her a fair refinancing plan. And the complaint to the Banking Commission? Gerald pressed. I have no control over the state's investigation, Blake said truthfully. But I won't be adding any additional evidence from Montgomery Ranch's dealings with your bank. Gerald leaned back, considering. Victoria is devastated, you know. She genuinely cared for you. I never meant to hurt her, Blake said sincerely. But continuing our engagement would have been wrong for both of us. Because of this Miller woman? Gerald asked, his tone somewhere between curious and dismissive. Partly, Blake admitted. Jenna helped me see what I really want in life, in a partner, but this isn't just about her. Victoria and I want different things. We always have. Gerald nodded slowly, as if finally accepting the truth of this. She's my only child, he said, his voice softer than Blake had ever heard it. I wanted the best for her, the Montgomery name, the combined influence of our families. It seemed perfect. On paper, maybe, Blake agreed. But marriage needs more than good business sense to succeed. Surely you and Elizabeth have taught Victoria that. A flicker of something, regret perhaps, crossed Gerald's face. Elizabeth and I have had our challenges. Perhaps Victoria learned more from watching us than we realized. Blake was surprised by this moment of vulnerability from the usually stoic banker. It's not too late for Victoria to find someone who truly makes her happy, he offered. Someone who loves her for herself, not her family name or connections. Perhaps, Gerald conceded. He straightened in his chair, businessman once more. About your proposal. I'm willing to extend Ms. Miller's mortgage under revised terms, contingent, upon Montgomery Ranch maintaining its primary accounts with Sterling Bank. And no foreclosure, Blake confirmed. No foreclosure, Gerald agreed. But Blake, be certain about this relationship. Small-town memories are long. If this ends badly, it won't, Blake said confidently. "But I appreciate the concern." As they stood to shake hands, Gerald added, "And Blake, Victoria doesn't know about this meeting. I'd prefer to tell her myself." "Of course," Blake nodded. "Thank you, Gerald." As Blake left the bank, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The ranch was safe, at least for now. Jenna's farm was safe. It wasn't a complete victory. Sterling Bank would still be watching them closely, but it was enough for today. He called Jenna immediately. "It worked," he told her when she answered. "Gerald agreed to new mortgage terms for your farm. No foreclosure." Jenna's relieved exhale was audible. "Really? Just like that?" "Well, I had to agree to keep Montgomery Ranch's accounts with Sterling Bank, but that was always the plan anyway." Blake didn't mention the personal side of his conversation with Gerald. Some things were better left private. "I don't know what to say," Jenna said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you seems inadequate." "Then don't say it," Blake replied. "Just have dinner with me tonight, at my place this time. I want to show you the ranch, the real ranch, not just the business side everyone else sees." "I'd like that," Jenna said softly. "What time should I come?" 6? And Jenna, "Bring Duke's favorite treats. He's been moping around all morning without you." Jenna laughed. "Duke or his owner?" "Both," Blake admitted with a smile. "Definitely both." Jenna had driven past the entrance to Montgomery Ranch many times over the years, but she'd never been past the imposing stone gates that marked the property line. As she turned her old pickup truck onto the long, winding driveway, she couldn't help feeling out of place. The main house came into view, a sprawling ranch-style home that managed to look both impressive and somehow welcoming. Unlike the Sterling mansion with its columns and formal gardens, Montgomery Ranch had been built to complement the landscape, not dominate it. Blake was waiting on the front porch, Duke alongside him. The dog spotted her truck first, barking excitedly and racing, down to meet her before she'd even parked. "Someone's happy to see you," Blake called, following at a more dignified pace. Jenna laughed as Duke practically climbed into her truck window. "The feeling's mutual, buddy," she said, scratching behind his ears. "I brought your favorites." She held up a paper bag that immediately captured the dog's full attention. Blake reached her truck as she was climbing out, pulling her into a warm embrace. "Hi," he murmured against her hair. "Hi yourself," Jenna replied, relaxing into his arms. After the stress of the past few days, being here felt unexpectedly like coming home. "Come on," Blake said, taking her hand. "Let me show you around before dinner." The tour of the ranch was revealing in ways Jenna hadn't anticipated. Blake didn't focus on the size of the property or the value of his breeding stock as she might have expected. Instead, he showed her his favorite fishing spot on the lake, the old oak tree where he'd built a fort as a boy, the small cabin where his great-grandfather had first lived when settling the land. "Dad used to bring me here whenever. I had a big decision to make," Blake said as they stood by the cabin. "He said it helped to remember where we came from, how hard our ancestors worked to build something that would last." "He sounds like a wise man," Jenna observed. "He was," Blake nodded. "I think he would have liked you. Mom, too." The simple statement touched Jenna deeply. "I wish I could have met them." As they headed back toward the main house, Blake grew quieter, as if building up to something. Finally, as they reached the back porch, he stopped. "Jenna, there's something I need to ask you." Her heart skipped a beat. "That sounds serious." "It is," Blake admitted. "These past weeks have been the most honest, most real time in my life. When I'm with you, I'm the person I want to be, not who everyone expects me to be." Jenna smiled, touched by his words. "I feel the same way. But Blake, we still have so much to figure out. Your world, my world, they're still so different." "Maybe they don't have to be," Blake suggested. "Maybe we can create our own world together." "What are you saying?" Jenna asked, her pulse quickening. Blake took both her hands in his. "I'm not proposing, not yet. That would be rushing things, and we both need time. But I am asking you to consider a partnership." "A partnership?" Jenna repeated, confused. "Montgomery Ranch has always focused on cattle, but I've been wanting to expand into organic produce, farm-to-table operations. Your knowledge of sustainable farming could be invaluable. We could merge our operations, your farm growing specialty crops, using your expertise with the resources of Montgomery Ranch behind it. Jenna stared at him, processing what he was suggesting. You want to go into business together? I want us to build something together, Blake clarified. Something that honors both our family legacies. Your farm stays yours. I'm not trying to absorb it into Montgomery Ranch, but we work as partners, supporting each other. And personally, Jenna asked cautiously, how does that fit in? Blake's smile was warm. Personally, I'm hoping this partnership grows in all possible ways. I love you, Jenna. I think I have since you refused that reward money and looked at me like I was crazy for offering it. Jenna laughed, remembering. You did look shocked, like no one had ever said no to your money before. They hadn't, Blake admitted ruefully. You were the first, and hopefully the last, because I'd like to spend my life figuring out what makes you happy if you'll let me. Tears pricked at Jenna's eyes. Blake Montgomery, are you sure you know what you're getting into? So I'm stubborn and independent and not exactly the society wife type. Thank God for that, Blake replied fervently. I've had enough of society expectations to last a lifetime. I want real, Jenna. I want you. Jenna took a deep breath, looking out over the beautiful ranch, then back at Blake's hopeful face. Her partnership, she said slowly, professional and personal, taking it one day at a time. Exactly, Blake nodded eagerly. No pressure, no timeline, just us, building something meaningful together. Duke, who had been watching their exchange, with apparent interest, nudged Jenna's hand with his nose as if adding his endorsement to the plan. Well, if Duke approves, Jenna laughed, wiping away a happy tear. Yes, Blake, I'd like to be your partner in every sense of the word. Blake's face lit up with joy as he pulled her into his arms, sealing their agreement with a kiss that promised a future neither of them could have imagined just a few short weeks ago. 6 months later, the first harvest from Miller Montgomery, Organic Farms was being celebrated with a small gathering at Jenna's farmhouse, now sporting a new roof and several other improvements. The vegetable garden had expanded significantly, with rows of heirloom tomatoes, peppers, and herbs stretching toward the back pasture. Frank manned the grill while several ranch hands and Jenna's new farm assistants mingled on the freshly painted porch. Duke wandered among the guests, accepting treats and attention with regal dignity. Quite a change from last spring, Rachel Carpenter commented, joining Jenna by the garden. The lawyer had become a friend during the battle with Sterling Bank. I still can't believe it sometimes, Jenna admitted, looking around at her transformed farm. The partnership with Blake had been more successful than either of them had anticipated. Her farming knowledge, combined with his business acumen and resources, had created something special. Speaking of changes, Rachel nodded toward the driveway, where a familiar silver car was pulling up. Unexpected guest? Jenna tensed slightly as Victoria Sterling emerged from the car. In the months since Blake had ended their engagement, Victoria had kept her distance, though Gerald had made peace with the situation, even becoming a cautious supporter of the Miller Montgomery venture. Blake appeared at Jenna's side, his hand finding hers automatically. "Did you invite her?" he asked quietly. "No," Jenna shook her head. "But I did invite Gerald. Maybe she came with him." Victoria approached them, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. She was dressed more casually than Jenna had ever seen her. In simple slacks and a blouse, her usual perfect makeup toned down. "I hope it's all right that I came," Victoria said, addressing both of them. "Dad mentioned the harvest celebration and I wanted to see what all the fuss was about." Blake and Jenna exchanged surprised glances. Of course, Jenna recovered. First, her natural hospitality taking over. "Everyone's welcome, there's plenty of food." "And Dad?" Blake asked, looking past Victoria for Gerald. "He couldn't make it," Victoria said. "Bank business, but he sends his congratulations." She hesitated, then added, "So do I actually, what you've built here, it's impressive." Coming from Victoria, the compliment was unexpected and clearly genuine. Jenna felt Blake relax beside her. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "That means a lot." An awkward silence fell until Duke, ever the social ambassador, trotted up to Victoria, and to everyone's shock, sat at her feet looking up expectantly. Victoria stared down at the dog who had never shown her anything but disdain. "Well, hello to you too," she said cautiously. "He remembers who feeds him," Blake laughed. "There are treats on the table if you want to officially make friends." As Victoria moved toward the food table, Duke trailing hopefully behind her, Jenna squeezed Blake's hand. "That was unexpected." "People can surprise you," Blake said. "Some for the worse, some for the better." "Like a rich rancher falling for a poor farm girl," Jenna teased. "Exactly like that," Blake agreed, pulling her close. "Best surprise of my life." From across the yard, they could see Victoria actually laughing as Duke performed tricks for treats. Gerald's assistant Margie telling her something that had the normally reserved woman smiling genuinely. "Think she's really changing?" Jenna wondered. "I hope so," Blake said. "Everyone deserves a chance to find what makes them happy." As the evening progressed, the initial tension faded. Victoria even helped serve dessert, chatting easily with Rachel about a charity auction she was organizing. By the time she left, saying goodbye to both Blake and Jenna with apparent sincerity, it felt like a new chapter had begun. After the last guests had departed, Blake and Jenna sat on the porch swing, Duke sleeping contentedly at their feet. The harvest moon hung low in the sky, bathing the farm in silver light. "Penny for your thoughts," Blake said, noticing Jenna's contemplative expression. "I was just thinking about that storm," she replied, "the one that brought Duke to my barn. How different everything would be if it hadn't happened exactly when it did." "I like to think we would have found each other anyway," Blake mused. "Some things are just meant to be." "The rich rancher and the poor farm girl?" Jenna smiled. "Sounds like something from a soap opera." Blake laughed, pulling her closer. "Maybe, but it's our story and I wouldn't change a word of it." From his spot on the porch, Duke lifted his head and thumped his tail in apparent agreement. "See?" Blake grinned. "Duke approves." "Duke approves of anyone who gives him treats," Jenna pointed out, but she was smiling too. "True. But he found you first, remember? Led me right where I needed to be." Blake turned to face her, his expression growing serious. "And speaking of where we need to be," he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Jenna's breath caught. "Blake, I promise to give us time," he said softly. "To build our partnership step by step. These past 6 months have been the happiest of my life, Jenna. I wake up every morning excited about what we're creating together, on the farm and between us." He opened the box to reveal a ring, not an ostentatious diamond like Victoria's had been, but a beautiful band of twisted gold with a small emerald that matched Jenna's eyes. "This was my grandmother's," Blake explained. "Dad gave it to Mom when they got engaged. Nothing flashy but solid. Real. Like us." Tears filled Jenna's eyes as Blake slid off the swing to kneel before her. "Jenna Miller, I love you more than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me? Not for business, not for appearances, but because I want to spend every day of my life building something beautiful with you." Duke, sensing the importance of the moment, sat up attentively, looking between them. Through happy tears, Jenna nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Blake Montgomery." As Blake slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms for a kiss, Duke barked joyfully, as if sealing their commitment with his approval. Later, as they walked hand in hand toward the main house, Duke running circles around them in celebration, Jenna looked up at the stars twinkling overhead. "Thank you," she whispered to whatever force of fate or chance had brought a lost dog to her barn that stormy night. Blake squeezed her hand, as if hearing her thoughts. "No," he said softly. "Thank you for saving more than just my dog." And as they reached the house that would soon be theirs together, not his world or her world, but the home they were building with love, Jenna knew that sometimes the most unexpected storms bring the most beautiful beginnings. The end.